Time to bring in the president's man for trade and manufacturing policy, Peter Navarro. Peter, you were just listening to that. There were a whole bunch of issues. I want to first begin with jobs. About a quarter of a million jobs created in industries across the gamut, reflecting the strongest jobs market in years. But it was the wage growth that a lot of our viewers found particularly impressive here. How are you and, of course, the administration going to keep this momentum going?
Well, yeah, let me hit some of the highlights, which I found interesting. For example, we hit an average now of 218,000 jobs a month in 2018, and we never crossed that threshold in 2016 or 2017. So clearly, we're hitting on all cylinders there. Not a single industry had job losses, which rarely ever happens. Construction and manufacturing, which is a sweet spot for the Trump economic plan to make manufacturing strong again, they were robust. And to date, since the election, we've had close to 500,000 new manufacturing jobs created, which is really great news. On the wage front, nominal wages 3.1%. Rarely breached 3% in the last few years. That's hitting on all cylinders. Inflation was very moderate, so real wages are going up. Here's the thing, Liz. When I was back on the campaign trail and talking to you frequently during that campaign, we talked a lot about the president talked a lot about the discouraged workers, the people home, sitting on their couch, shades drawn, discouraged, out of the workforce, not being counted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, basically throwaways. And guess what? We put over 1.3 million of those people back into the workforce. And another thing we talked about, I don't know if you remember this, but it was a quite extraordinary statistic from the Federal Reserve that said 1 out of 4 prime age workers between the ages of 25 and 54. They're
now getting hired.
Yeah, and the labor force participation rate popped once again on that, up to a half a point. So I'm extremely encouraged by growth that is not non-inflationary, which means this can continue, and it's basically the result not just of one policy, but of a wide range of policies. Tax cuts, deregulation, unleashing the energy sector, Buy American, steel and aluminum tariffs, getting these trade deals like South Korea and the USMCA right for a change, and increasing our defense spending. It's a theme that the president talked about back in 2017, that economic security, Liz, is national security. So that when we strengthen our manufacturing and defense industrial base, we're not only strengthening our national defense, but we're actually moving towards economic prosperity. And
Peter, after years of incremental moves, because we were pulling ourselves out of the financial crisis, many are marveling as they watch this go from a 6-cylinder to an 8-cylinder economy. But we're starting to see business investment flashing a warning signal, going from, I believe it was about 11.5% in the first quarter to just 0.8% in the third. Why is that? Why do you think that is? Because we're hearing sort of the anecdotal comments from business people that they're concerned about the ongoing trade war.
Well, first of all, let's not do anything, particularly investing, by anecdote. You always want to look at the data, and there'll be some inventory adjustments and things like that. But the tax cuts, particularly on the corporate side, is going to be the gift that keeps on giving for the next several years, because what we see here is a reinvestment in America's future. Also, one of the strong positive effects of the tariffs, things like steel and aluminum, is we're seeing tremendous investment pouring into those industries. So I'm not concerned at all about people investing here in America. And by the way, there's all sorts of companies outside our borders who now understand that they better be investing inside our borders if they want to do business with America.
A lot of them are definitely getting the message, because it is out there making headlines. The president just said we're going to make a, quote, very good deal with the Chinese. But there have been conflicting comments. In the last 24 hours, there was the Bloomberg report that the president had asked his team to draft a trade deal with China. Now your compatriot Larry Kudlow had refuted that. You get to be the tiebreaker here. After President Trump's phone call with Xi, did the president tell you, Peter, and the top trade negotiators to draw up a trade deal with China?
So put another mark, black mark on journalism for fake news, because that thing had no stroke at all, no fact. Bloomberg once again didn't do its fact checking. It tends to be, I think, probably the worst perpetrator of false leaks on the business side of journalism. What's that kind of stuff is done, it's trying to poke the bear. It's probing to see how the administration will react.
But it would not be entirely out of the question for there to at least be some type of framework that's discussed. Are you saying there's no framework that's been put out there?
So I stay in my lane. We have one U.S. trade representative, Robert Lighthizer, the best trade representative in U.S. history. Although, so Bob doesn't get too big ahead, I remind him that USTR has only been around since the 60s. But that's his thing, and the president. That's between those two gentlemen. And I think that the bigger issue with China is that we've laid out on the table, I did a report from my office about the 50 different unfair trade practices they impose on us.
Well, you
it's
were
a structural
prescient.
problem.
You wrote that book, The Coming Wars, plural, on China, and you look like you're a soothsayer because you were right on it. But with the G20 at the end of the month, is the president telling you and Robert Lighthizer to get this deal done by the G20, or is the timeline extended well past that? So
what happens in the Oval or the Roosevelt Room stays there. It's not going to talk about any private conversations with the president. What I can tell you, you can keep trying. You'll never get anything out of me, okay? But what I can tell you is that the two presidents are going to be meeting at the G20, as would happen regardless of whether or not trade would be discussed, because that's what's normally done at these meetings. Let's see what happens from this business point of view and the stock market point of view. What I can tell you is this. This is a bull market that's driven by a bull economy, that's driven by a president who 24/7 thinks about how to make this economy grow.
And he's talking right now
to
again,
put Americans
Peter,
back to work.
I know you won't mind if we have to listen to the rest of it.
Player here.
He's talking about jobs one more time. Let's go to that. Stand by.
Larry Kudlow, Kevin Haskins, all of these people, they were so impressed. So we're really doing it. The economy is on fire. I think it may be the greatest economy our country's ever had. And I hope people realize that when they go out on Tuesday and they vote, or if they do early voting. But I hope people realize that. Thank you very much.
And again, Peter, as you stand on the lawn of the White House and the president is saying, oh, I'm sorry, he's still speaking.
We want to have strong borders. But if you look at what's happening with our country, we have the greatest economy we probably have ever had. We just had among the best job numbers we've ever had. 250,000 jobs created in October despite tremendous hurricanes, which are always a huge detriment. Everybody thought, even we thought, the number could never be anywhere near that because of the hurricane. So really, we have the greatest economy we've ever had. People are working. We're down to 3.7% unemployment. We're doing some very special things. Plus, everybody, we've gotten a tremendous tax reduction. People are bringing home more money. And you know what else about the jobs? They now can go out and get a job they want because they have choice. They never had any choice. They can go out and get a job they want. And speaking of choice, what we've done for the military and the vets, we've gotten them choice, where they can now go to a doctor and the United States pays for it instead of waiting in line for 2 months or 3 months and not being able to see a doctor and literally dying while they're waiting in line to see a doctor. After 44 years they've been working on it. I got it approved. And that's choice for veterans. So it's a great thing. So our country's doing really well. And I will see you in West Virginia. See you in
You never really know when he's done because people throw another question and they'll come back, right, Peter? I mean, you've seen him, be very accessible.
Led Zeppelin concert. You have the encore because he does such a great job. You don't want him to leave.
Yeah, he's like a performance of Rent or Hamilton. There are about 50 encores. But
everybody
Peter,
wants him.
As we finish this, because we know that the G20 is coming up in Buenos Aires, Fox Business and I will be there. I hope you'll be there so you can give us the latest scoop. But what must be in that deal that the president and the administration make with China, where you would say that we really needed, and there you can put a pen to paper and sign it?
Well, I think you can distinguish between two things. One is China buying more stuff, whether it's coal or whether it's soybeans or whatever.
Okay.
We've gone way past that in terms of what's needed in a deal, in the sense that there's all these structural issues. And we want to make sure that China stops stealing our intellectual property, forcing its transfer. We want access to their markets, and we want to make sure that we can protect the technological crown jewels of this country that will allow us to prosper going forward. And the report I did with my office for the White House listed over 50 different practices that China engages in that are outside the norms of international behavior. And Robert Lighthizer, the USTR, when he did his Section 301 report, he listed the whole thing. So I guess you know what has to be on the table would be, for example, Ambassador Lighthizer's USTR report would be a good starting point. The structural change has to happen, and we're all aligned on that here at the White House.
They're still cheating. I mean, it was just this week that the U.S. charged 2 alleged Chinese spies with stealing the blueprints for a U.S.-made jet. If the administration discovers anything additional with that kind of important intellectual property, how do you deal with the Chinese in the end, Peter?
Well, I mean, Liz, the other problem here so far in the negotiation is that the Chinese won't even acknowledge what they're doing. I mean, it's hard to get them to agree to stop forcing the technology transfer if they say they're not doing it. It's hard to get them to stop stealing our stuff if they say they're not doing it. And by the way, it looks like that theft has simply accelerated from the days of when President Obama signed a deal with President Xi a couple of years ago. So there's serious issues. The good news here is that our economy is not dependent on China.
Indeed.
And we're doing quite well. So it's all good.
Good to see you, Peter. Come back again. Thank you very much.
You take care.